It is created by the Medical Schemes Act, and one of the legislative mandate of the council is to, for instance, advise the minister on policies or on matters relating to the private sector. It also is to support the national policies. So to answer the question that was posed by one of the media houses, indeed, the Council for Medical Scheme supports the national policy, which is the National Health Insurance. The next question was asked from the journalist from Newsroom that spoke to how CMS will assist or ensure healthcare affordability. The Council for Medical Scheme is a regulator to the schemes, and it is actively engaged in ensuring that the benefit packages that are afforded to the members of the scheme are affordable. We deal with various benefit option proposals from various schemes, and we get benefit packages, or we get to approve benefit packages that are low in terms of payments. However, as I've mentioned, that any benefit that is provided to a private patient or members and beneficiaries of the medical schemes must comply with the provisions of the Medical Schemes Act. And one of the critical provisions in the Medical Schemes Act is the provision of the prescribed minimum benefits. We do have low-paying schemes, but it is the mandate of the council to ensure that these benefits are benefits that are meaningful and covers the health of the beneficiaries and the members of the scheme. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, there's either something wrong with me or with the microphone.
Both.
All right, okay. Yeah, thank you. So let me just start with the issue of the, I suppose the first two questions are really the same, because the one is any chance of putting the life of patients at risk. The other is can you give us insights on the consumer side of things? I mean, that's the same thing. What we found, I mean, there were doctors that came with their patients, right, to say that our concerns are not just our concerns, but they're concerns of our patients, because we're just a conduit through which patients receive health care. So the impact on patients is immense. You know, if you are told that you cannot see your doctor except if you pay cash, I mean, that effectively is exclusionary. It means you simply cannot access healthcare at all, because most patients simply cannot afford to pay cash when they are on medical aid. You know, so it's a blanket exclusion if there is an incorrect decision that your specific provider should either be blocked or should be investigated, or there should be a clawback. So we found that risk very, very high. Now, in some instances where a patient is told, well, you pay cash now, they will change a doctor, you know, which means you close your practice because your practice is 100% or 90% dependent on the medical aid. And then you are told, no, sorry, no medical aid will take you. What do? You know, you close the practice because your patients leave you. They find other people that are not blocked by schemes. So we found that impact to be quite severe. The other problem is, what happens, you must have in mind the isolated doctor that's investigated by a scheme that employs an investigator, a lawyer, sometimes a retired policeman, to do an interrogation, and then the options given to the doctor being, it is either you sign an acknowledgement of debt or toast, or we don't pay you. And at that point, they sign the acknowledgement of debt. But signing that acknowledgement of debt also means perpetual indebtedness, in which you can never actually sustain a practice, So it's actually quite a severe impact that it has on the practitioner and on their patients as well. And so we have said in the report that quite a lot of these changes are to be changes made internal by the schemes themselves. But I think that if you live in South Africa and you say, okay, go and change yourself, you should be very naive. And that's why we say, well, the problem is here. It's the minister has the power to change this. It's also here, the scheme has the power to regulate this. And why are they not doing it? So that's the question we've asked in the report. So, well, they should actually start the regulation because they've got the power under the Act. And if the Act is deficient, as Section 59.3 is, we'll say, well, change the Act. But what is intolerable is racial discrimination. So that's what we've said. Now, Nokukanya, you've made a very interesting observation about the algorithm. Now, the algorithms are these things that appear like neutral. This is all like technology-driven, etc. But the problem that we've pointed out is that we have no insight into the input into the algorithm. No one has any insight. Even the minister doesn't know what goes into the algorithm, but he is the regulator. Even the CMS doesn't know what goes into the algorithm at all. And that is why we say the first thing is transparency into the input into the algorithm. And if I sounded like I was saying the algorithm is neutral, that's not what I was saying. I'm saying we don't know if it is neutral or not. What we know is that we have no insight into it. And that's why we are calling for transparency into this algorithm. Then the problem is not just the algorithm. It's the algorithm plus human contact. Because the algorithm shows you patterns. Too many claims coming from Durban South. Too many claims coming from Sandton. And then that gives you an indication that, okay, you should concentrate your resources of investigation here because that is where your greatest area of risk is. But it's still the human interaction about, should I now investigate Dr. So-and-so, or should I investigate Dr. So-and-so, right? And then once you get into that, then they make decisions about where they should go and they should not go. We found extreme examples of one instance in which I think it was GEMS, that they decided that they are going to focus on KwaZulu-Natal. And once you make that decision on focusing on KwaZulu-Natal, where there is a high concentration of Indian doctors, it's inevitable that you're going to find a spike in the investigation specifically of Indian doctors. But that's because the board set, or if it's not the board, a committee set at GEMS and made this decision. Right? So it's not always the algorithm, it's algorithm plus human interaction. But in addition to human interaction, in other words, the indicator of where you should investigate, there is still the method of doing the investigation. How do they deal with a white doctor in the course of questioning or interrogation versus how do they deal with a black doctor in the course of investigation and interrogation, right? And that's where you find that these sort of racially loaded methods of investigation, and then again, those are people doing them, so it's not just a neutral algorithm, but again, it's the absence of regulation. Because we never really ask, not I say we, like the council, never really ask for detailed reports and the transcript of the interrogation. What actually happened? Did it remind you of the apartheid-style interrogation, or was it actually a fair interrogation? And that's why we ask for a tribunal. That it's the tribunal that must oversee the nature of the investigation. So these are the things we said what we have had is enough to indicate that there is a problem here, and the problem is racial discrimination. We have to call it racial discrimination. Otherwise, if you sugarcoat this thing, you end up not doing any actual reforms. Then you are right about individual disputes, and this is very, very important. A lot of doctors came expecting us to adjudicate their complaints. We can't. We have got no power. What we are looking at is the system, is the structure. That the system and the structure is producing racially discriminatory outcomes. Now, the individual doctor must decide what to do about their specific case. Because what we found is that a doctor will come and raise their story, and then the scheme will also come with their own defense about the specific. Now, imagine the number of doctors we had. I mean, if we actually had individual complaints, I mean, I know people say, okay, you've taken 4.5 years. We would have probably taken 8 years, so this would never have come to an end. But for us, that's not relevant. What's relevant is that there is a systemic racial discrimination. That's what we found, systemic racial discrimination, which means it must be solved by regulatory improvements, which must be initiated by the scheme, monitored by the scheme, and where they need legislative changes that we have recommended, they must ask the minister for permission. Now, do the individual practitioners have a right to sue? I mean, I don't know. I'm not here to give legal advice. I was just an investigator here. But they should go and ask their attorneys and their advocates. Yeah, but I can't make that comment.
They want free consultation.
No, I can't make that comment. I mean, it's possible that they do, but it's possible that they don't. I just don't know. But that's also not my function. Okay, SJ wants to say something. Oh, yes. Why did we focus on 3? Yeah, I mean, that's again, how many are there? 70 medical schemes in this, 71, like 71 medical schemes in this country. Yes. So we had to look at the market, like the size of the schemes vis-a-vis the market. These are the 3 largest schemes that cover, I think, more than 80% of the insured market in South Africa. So if we get the facts right there, those facts are indicative of the market patterns, because we're not looking at individuals, we're looking at the patterns. But the other reality is that I think probably 99% of the complaints related to those 3 schemes that we had to deal with. So it was not going to be useful to. Well, there was a report I think made by Polmet. I think Polmet came and they made inputs, but there were really no issues relating to the conduct of Polmet. I think Polmet in any event is administered at the time. They were administered by Med Scheme. So whatever we find on Med Scheme applies to Polmet, because that's what the schemes also do. They sort of aggregate to a single administrator. So the patterns of that administrator. In fact, at some point, GEMS was administered by Med Scheme itself. So the real reason was looking at the market size and the size of the schemes, giving you an indication of where the market trends might be. But also this thing had to be practical. I mean, you couldn't go around looking for all 71 schemes. I think Minister. I also wanted to just thank the Minister for reducing the queue from 7 to 3.
We're going to interrogate you and reopen your investigation. It's unfair, yes. Okay, yes. No, thank you very much. The first question, I think, is very obvious. What do we feel about discrimination, or what does the Minister feel? I think every South African should be ashamed of finding any pockets of discrimination 30 years after democracy. But you are aware that in reality, while the Constitution and all the acts are against discrimination, it's still happening. It might be one of the reasons why we want a national dialogue to refocus the country, because there are too many cases of discrimination which have been reported, some of them denied that there's nothing like that. But here today we have got the proof that there is live discrimination even among professionals. The people who are being punished here are professionals at the very high level of society, but there's still discrimination among themselves. So it shows that we still have far way off of practicing what is in our constitution and in our acts. So we feel very bad about it. That's why we won't leave any stone unturned. I have just told you during my opening remarks that we had 14 departments of health. That's discrimination, obviously. We abolished them via the constitution and we thought it's over, only to wake up today to find that we have got two different, not departments now. There's one minister. In those olden days, there were many ministers. There's one minister, but there are two systems. And inside those systems, there's discrimination, which today is actually being exposed here. The question from newsroom, what is the balance between NHI and the report? As I've already said, we have got health market inquiry, we have got this report, we have got NHI. There are areas where they intersect. There are areas where they show the direction which the country must take. So all the two reports, health market inquiry and this one, are going to help us a lot in sort of fashioning or designing a future healthcare system. The issue of cash, this question was asked for advocate, and he responded to it, how patients suffer. But I also want to remind you, there are three methods for paying for health in our country. And if I'm not mistaken, in all parts of the world, healthcare is paid for by three methods. The first one is called mandatory prepayment of health. You are paying for health before the person is sick, and it's mandatory. And that's what the NHI want to achieve. There are people who tell us that we are mad. There's nothing called free healthcare anywhere in the world. Nobody said anything about free healthcare. We said free healthcare at the point of service. That's all. That's what medical schemes are about. Medical schemes are providing free healthcare at the point of service for the people who are members. And in NHI, we want to do it for the whole population. That's mandatory prepayment of health. The second method of paying for health is called voluntary prepayment. That's what medical schemes are. You join me, like if you go to join Discovery, it's your own choice. It's voluntary. But you are paying for health before you are sick. Because if you wait for when you are sick, it will be a crisis. The third method is called fee for service, or out of pocket, or simply cash. And that seems to be a predominant method for most of the population rather, in South Africa. And when we said NHI, we want to run away from that. Fortunately, when we started the white paper, there was no health market inquiry by former Chief Justice Ngobo. Now the health market inquiry is there. And do you know what is in the recommendation? It says abolish this fee for service, because it's a perverse incentive in healthcare. It disadvantages many people. That's in the report, and we are going to implement it. Don't have people paying cash for health care because they are going to die in large numbers. The World Health Organization has even got graphs that shows which country is utilizing any one of these three methods more than the other. Any country that is utilizing fee for service more than the others is in trouble. And a country that's also utilizing voluntary prepayment more than mandatory is in trouble, which South Africa is. In that report, released in 2009 by the World Health Organization, the USA and South Africa were declared outliers when it comes to this method. Outliers because while many developed countries use mandatory prepayment, US and South Africa were more on voluntary prepayment and also on cash. And the World Organization is saying this is outlying outside what governments are normally practicing, because people are going to suffer. They will suffer, of course. The question you ask advocate about patients suffering because they have to pay cash. was not only picked up by him, was also picked by Chief Justice Ngobo with his panel in the health market inquiry, that when you make people pay cash, they do suffer, and they suffer a lot. In my presentation on NHI, when I showed those graphs of the World Health Organization in 2009, there are two countries that demonstrate this. It's Sierra Leone and Guinea, where 90% of the payment for care for health is cash. What does it have to do with health and people suffering? Ebola. Ebola. How does Ebola relate to them? In 2013, when Ebola struck Sierra Leone and Guinea, it went for a long time without anybody detecting it. For a very long time, spreading in the population. By the time it exploded, it has been going on in the population without anybody detecting it. Was it a failure of science? No. It's because in Sierra Leone, 90% of the population, to see a doctor, they must pay cash. If they don't have cash, they can't go to a doctor. And if you have caught Ebola, it will spread. And you will suffer until you die, until it affects many people. So cash payment does not only affect individuals, advocate, it affects the whole population. Because that's exactly what happened there. It's a very clear demonstration. That's why on the graph on mandatory prepayment, voluntary prepayment, fee for service, the World Health Organization declared Africa a disaster in the making. That's the heading on those graphs for Africa. It said, Africa, disaster in the making, where lots and lots of people in the population are supposed to pay cash for health. It doesn't work. It has never worked anywhere in the world. So advocate, we accept that your finding is corroborating what former Chief Justice will find out, and we'll have to deal with those. The question was asked to Dr. Mabeba, as the chairperson of Council of Medical Scheme, whether they can make healthcare affordable. They are trying, just as a structure of the whole private healthcare system, as their regulator. But this is the job of ministers of health, of healthcare systems around the whole world, that healthcare ought to be affordable. And I've mentioned this statement when they said we are interfering. I said, if you go anywhere in the world and you find the minister of health who say as far as prices are concerned, the minister is neutral, then that minister must leave that seat. No minister of health must be neutral about affordability of health. Our job, our mandate as ministers of health is to make healthcare affordable to the population. That's a very serious and big mandate. So it's not only for the council, it's for the minister to make sure that healthcare is affordable. The motivation of us going to the Competition Commission in 2013, that led to the health market inquiry, was because I lodged a complaint with them that healthcare is not affordable even for people who are working, even for people who are on medical schemes. It's no longer affordable. Please do something about it. I was not asking for health market inquiry. I was asking the Competition Commission if they can do something about this, the affordability of healthcare, which is running even from the middle class itself. Instead of doing that, the Competition Commission said we want to prove whether what you are saying is true. Is healthcare unaffordable in the country? Let's prove it by doing an investigation. And they called that a health market inquiry. That's how it came into the being. They were investigating affordability because we have already picked it up. So we're not folding our arms. We were looking in the system and say, how do we improve it? And we thought it will take 6 months to finalize that report. But as I said, it took 5 years, showing the complexity of all these things that we're talking about here. The other question, that was asked from us, is a remark made by the advocate here. Why the department or the government or the Council of Medical Scheme is doing nothing about some of these things. Advocate, the way the system works is this, and that's why if you read the NHI Act, we are trying to change it. The way the system works is this. The issue of billing and payment is between the doctor and the scheme. We don't come in between. People did not even believe it, that we don't even know, by the way. It sounds funny, but it's true. We don't even know where the doctors are practicing. There's no way of knowing. That's why in the National Health Act, we introduced the concept of certificate of need, which was attacked severely. A certificate of need is to know where the doctor is practicing, what is the doctor doing, what type of premises is happening. And that's why after losing it in court, because we lost this in court, just like the BHF which lost on the LCBOs, they appeal, we are also appealing, because we want to show the court, yes, we don't have the power to know where the doctor is. At the moment, the way the system works, advocate, when a doctor has passed medicine and they've got the certificate, they go to register with the Health Professions Council. That's professional registration. And they get a registration number. It's simply to say, we recognize you as a qualified medical practitioner. But for them to go and open a practice and be paid for by medical schemes, they need to get another registration number. They get that from the Board of Healthcare Funders. It's called a practice number. When you look at doctors' documents, it's written PR number. That's a practice number. Without that number, the medical scheme won't pay you. You can charge cash, of course, because we have got a registration with the Health Professions Council. But you need a PR number, which is given by the same council of, the Board of Healthcare Funders. There are people who have asked us, and we are going to ask industry, that number must be given by the Council of Medical Schemes, not by the medical schemes themselves, because they must give it with conditions. At the moment, the medical schemes give, themselves through Board of Healthcare Funders, gives a practice number. Now, the irony of it is that with that practice number, you can go and open any